I need it for somebody, my neighbor. Now we finally worked it out. What'd you say? She got it today. I sent it 3 years ago. She told me this morning at 7.
Okay. Good evening, everyone. We're ready to begin.
I sent it to her and she got it. The link to the hook? I want the link for the, she can hear it on the computer, not a WhatsApp. At the time, live.
Has the link been sent?
Yeah. So how could I get that? Please. It's very nice. It's a business.
Are we ready? Okay. Today we're going to be studying part 2 of last week's subject that we introduced, which is the subject of anger. Right? We explained the pasuk in last week's Parsha, Parshas Vayakel. One malacha of Shabbos that the Torah depicts, writes in scripture, is that you shall not ignite a flame in your encampment. We gave 7 different interpretations in the Mefarshim, one of them being, as the Chassidishe writes, do not light the fire of anger in your encampment. And he says it's not just on Shabbos, but any time during the week. This is a remez, a hint to the grave prohibition against kas, against anger. So for today's class, what we're going to do is focus on the midah of kas. We read a little bit inside last week from the Shulchanaruchharav. We're going to continue and finish that. We're going to go through 2 parts. Part 1 is understanding the prohibition, the severity, the effects, both the psychological effects from a behavioral clinical perspective, as well as of course the effect that's brought down in Chazal and brought down in Svarim, and especially Sifrei Mekubalim. How to deal with and different ways of how to deal with anger will be our part 2 of this class. Anger management through Torah sources, what Chazal advises, as well as to, again, behavioral clinical advice that is given for anger management. Now, not that I suspect anyone here of having anger management issues, but as we will soon see, anger is something that is, universal is true, but it's also something that changes in quality from person to person and quantity from person to person. So we'll begin with an anecdote, with a joke regarding part 1, what is anger, and then we'll get to part 2, anger management. What is anger? The daughter asked her son, what is the difference between, my teacher asked me in school, explain the difference between upsetness, anger, and despair. So he says, I'll do for you right now an experiment. You'll see for yourself. He opens up the phone book, calls a random number, and he says, hi, can I please speak with Melvin? And the person at the end of the line says, I am sorry, you have the wrong number. Please look at the number before you call. There's no Melvin in this residence. He hangs up. He calls back 2 minutes later to the same number. Hi, can I please speak with Melvin? He says, you just spoke to me 2 minutes ago. I told you this is not the right number. Do not call back. He calls back a 3rd time. This time the guy explodes at him on the phone. He hangs up. The guy hangs up and he tells his daughter the first time was upsetness. The second time was already leading to anger. The 3rd time was anger. So she asks, what's despair? He says, watch. He calls back the same person. And at this time, when the person answers the phone, he says, hello, screams. And he says, hi, I'm sorry to bother you, but this is Melvin. Did I get any phone calls? So that is our lesson in anger. Anger has a lot of different stages of the fuse. So we don't define anger as simple upsetness, but that is the beginning of the development of that atomic bomb, of the explosion. The uranium is already beginning to process when we have upsetness, and eventually can become the explosion. what is anger management now? So a couple was speaking to somebody who was interviewing them about how they managed 50 years, such a great marriage. They don't get upset at each other. They don't get angry at each other. And the interviewer asked one of the spouses, I will stay away from gender, but one of them, so how is it that you really never get angry at your spouse? I mean, things happen all the time in a marriage that can cause anger and upsetness. So he says, well, I have a very special trick that I do in order to help manage my anger. I have anger at times, like everybody, but I manage it, so I never reveal, and my spouse never sees it revealed. He says, what do you do? He says, well, whenever I feel that I get angry at my spouse, I run to the toilet and I clean it. I give it a good washing. So he says, the questioner, the journalist asked them, wow, so, I mean, how does that work? He says, well, I use a toothbrush, and, with a toothbrush, it takes a lot of time, and it really gets out all of my frustrations and anger. When the interview is over, the other spouse turns to the spouse who said this and said, that's amazing. Now I know the reason why the toilets are so clean. But tell me something. How does that relieve your anger? I don't really understand. He says, you don't get it. I use your toothbrush. So that's an anger management joke. Okay, so let's begin. The issue of anger, other than the remez that we have in the pasuk is discussed a lot in Chazal. We began reading. We're going to reread it again from chapter 156, Kufman Vav, in the section of Orach Chaim and Shulchanaruch, where the Alter Rebbe goes through a number of different character traits, and he discusses anger. And number one, the level of prohibition, and number two, the severity. So we're going to read from him and then read from a few of the sources before we summarize this point. Kas midaramoid. Anger is a terrible trait. Migas derives from haughtiness. We discussed this last week, how it comes from haughtiness. This is also mentioned in chapter 1 in Tanya, when the Alter Rebbe is discussing in the beginning of Tanya, first chapter, second half of the first chapter, the personality of the animal soul, that the animal soul of a human being, including Gentiles, is made up of the four Yesodis, the four elements of fire, water, air, and earth. And he explains how different character traits derive from these different elements of the soul. How from the element of Eish comes Kas the Gaiva Miyasaida Eish. Anger and haughtiness come from Yasaida Eish. So we see that he lists Gaiva and Kas to both be coming from the same root element of the soul, of the animal soul, and so on and so forth. And from there, in Tanya, we understand basic psychology, how different people have different dispositions and challenges in different character traits. Some are more depressed, some are more happy, some are more frivolous, some are more serious, some are more angry, some are more calm. Some are more lustful, some are more controllable. This all comes from the different weights of our animal souls. We have different animal souls. The Gemara says, just like their opinions, just like their faces aren't the same, so too their opinions aren't the same. And likewise, our personalities are not the same, because these four elements, which we know make up every physical existence on this earth, of which there's plenty of, so too there are myriads of different types and personalities based on the formula of how these four elements put together, and that explains we have people with different dispositions. Some have disposition towards anger and some do not. In any event, so it comes from the same root as gasus haruach, as haughtiness, and mechain, and because of this, that haughtiness, as the Gemara in Saita explains, is one of the worst midas, as Hashem cannot reside with someone who is haughty. Therefore, a person should be very, very distant from this. Gamkein, until the opposite extreme. We explained this last week, though, while the Rambam says that a person should never be an extremist and always take the middle ground, the middle road regarding different characters, that sometimes you need it, sometimes you don't. So take the middle ground of when you do, when you don't, to use it. Nonetheless, regarding kas, it should never be used. Kas should never be used. It's something that it's not. A lot of different character traits that could be bad should be in our tool closet to use when necessary. Sometimes a person can't be kind. Sometimes he's got to be a little tough for disciplinary purposes, for the purpose of getting a result that can only come through gvura. So sometimes he must take out his gvura toolbox to use, even though he doesn't like it or he doesn't want to. A person should never be an extreme of chesed or extreme of gvura. They should always be in the middle ground. At the same time, regarding kas, real anger is something that is never, ever permitted according to Jewish law, something that is never condoned. It should never be used. That toolbox should be put away and never taken out. Obviously easier said than done, but at least we know that that is how severe it is looked at. In the secular world, it's interesting. They don't, there's a lot of study on anger, and of course we know there's many anger management courses in the world. You have a lot of them that are mandatory. Police a lot of times will make, in battery charges, they will make anger management courses mandatory for the abusive spouse. A road rage. I remember in Miami there was a guy who did road rage on Collins Avenue, and he told me that they revoked his license for 30 days unless he takes a anger management course. I don't remember the situation, it was 20 years ago, but I remember we were talking about it. I was in the same office as he was where the course was taking place. And he was just telling me that that's, he had to get I wasn't in the course, no. It wasn't me. I didn't have much road rage. It's kind of hard to have road rage in Miami. Everyone's very relaxed, unless you're a New Yorker. New York, everyone, everything is. But in Miami, anyway. So, bottom line, getting back to our point, is that what's interesting is that first of all, I didn't find too much study in actual medicine of understanding the science or the understanding of the psychology of anger. There are some, but not in classical medicine. If anyone knows, let me know. Anyone on a global audience can also send a link if they know of anything. But I saw that it's not really so much studied or discussed by modern medicine. And you have different shittas, different approaches of anger management and how to deal with it. Why I'm bringing this up now in this stage is to explain that while the Alter Rebbe here is setting the tone, the red line, that anger is never okay in Judaism. You have others who say, no, anger is okay. You have other anger management courses and planning of how they teach that, no, it is okay, but just know how to use it or know when to use it. But they don't have this hashkafa, this perspective that, no, this is a forbidden tool. It can never be used. So the shachik, to the opposite extreme. And even if a person needs to get angry at the people in order to chastise them, to separate them from sinning, to make them do tshuva, one should only make believe, should act and impersonate an angry person. But inside he should remain calm. He should not actually be angry in his emotions. So this is already the Alter Rebbe here setting the stone of how prohibited it is, and that a person has to distance himself completely from it. Now the Alter Rebbe begins explaining the severity of what it causes, what it does. The sages state in the Gemara in Shabbos 105b, the one who gets angry, it is considered as if he is serving idolatry, which we'll explain later on in the class today from Tanya why this is the case. When the Arizal writes, as we will read shortly, that the person's soul leaves his body, he loses his soul. We'll see in the Arizal what this means. As the verse in Eve states, a person, Torif here would be from the Lashon of devours. A person devours his soul in his nostrils. The Alter Rebbe, based on the Arizal, as we will read, it learns from this pasuk that is to be read as follows: the apay with a person's anger, teirif nafshay. With a person's anger, he devours his soul. The soul leaves him. He loses his soul. The fichach, therefore, because of these two very severe things, that it's like avodah zarah, and the person loses his soul. The sages commanded and instructed one to distance himself tremendously from anger, to the point, meaning what is the opposite extreme? The opposite extreme is not just that you don't express your anger. To get angry and not have some kind of management of expression is problematic. But they actually command and instruct that a person should work on himself, that he doesn't feel angry at all and doesn't get affected or intimidated or upset at all by the words of those who went to anger college to know how to make people angry. They are professional, is there a name? Their an official name? Provocators? They are very, they know the ways of how to touch people's buttons and pull their cords to get them upset. So even the machisim who do this, sometimes not purposely, of course, but nonetheless, they are doing things that can very legitimately make someone very angry and explode. You don't feel it at all, you ignore it. Zu derech tzadikim. This is the path of the tzadikim. Aluvim ve'einen ovim. You get offended and you don't offend back. I know this is out of date, this hashkafa. Today you get offended, you offend back twice. Today this is what we see in social media and everything. There's no such thing. On the contrary, if you offend if someone got dug up dirt on you, you dig up double the dirt on him. And so on and so forth. The Alter Rebbe here says that no, Chazal teach us that the path of the righteous is that we are offended and we do not offend back. Shem and Chapasim, we hear our belittlement, our shame, the Eina Mashivim, and we don't answer them back. Right. Oisim, me'ahava, smechem b'yisurim. A person accepts everything from love and rejoices in his yisurim, meaning that he takes the hits without needing to retaliate, without retaliating. Bittul. He doesn't fight back. It depends, For example, let me just tell you an example. What if, I don't know what you do. Let's say whatever. First, number one, there are a lot of perspectives that Christianity adapted that are found in Judaism. There's nothing wrong with that. We don't negate a hashkafa just because it's found in another belief system. We only negate it if there's something in root wrong with it in Judaism. If there's nothing in root wrong, on the contrary, it's actually rooted in Judaism, then I don't care if they took it. And on the contrary, Goyim are allowed to do mitzvahs. Why not? So if a guy wants to adapt this halacha, now what you do mean by Christian thought is maybe a little more the idea of forgiveness, which is corrupted a little bit. That they say, well, forgive the murderer. If someone murdered your, if a good Christian man's relative was murdered, so they speak and espouse a lot about the idea of forgiving. In Judaism, now we have a mitzvah deraisa, according to many poskim, mitzvah deraisa on the relative to actually seek vengeance and kill goyel adam, and that's why people come to tzvas. Why do all the murderers come to tzvas? To run away from those people, and the Torah condones that. So there are things that obviously are not Torah philosophy, but nonetheless, at the same time, regarding this idea of anger, no, we say that a person should distance himself completely from it. And so in many, many cases, when a person is shamed or offended, they shouldn't answer back. They should just ignore it. And again, this is not the instinctive response. The instinctive response is to be like a lion and attack back and, tenfold and attack back. And this is in all relationships, not just in public. This is with relatives, with spouses, etc. That when a person feels that they were offended, they feel that they need to protect themselves. The defense mechanism comes out. It's like the automatic, defense shields of rockets that come out when the radar sees the rocket from the enemy territory coming. So it's like an automatic defense system that human nature has. that it opens up. And this is something that needs to be worked on. But nonetheless, what Chazal teach us and instruct us is that this is the path one should take. Aluvim vein and olvim, shem chvasim mashivim, oisim alas mechem b'yisurim, v'aleim akasav eimer. And on these people, the verse states, the oyav of ketzeis hashemish b'gvurasa. On these people, the verse states that those who love Hashem, the sun will come out in its might for them. What this means is that in the future, Elam Habo, they will receive a special splendor of godliness that no one else will be able to merit, over the fact that they were so nullified and they accepted God's will without needing to attack back, without needing to respond back and shame back the other person for what the person did. It's obviously harder said than done, but it's very important to know that this perspective exists, that this is the Torah approach, because most people, the instinctive approach that we grew up with, naturally and not naturally, is that we do need to attack back, we do need to respond. Anyone who works in public service needs to adapt this, because, as we know, there's a saying that goes, no good deed goes unpunished. Meaning that a lot of people, I'm sure many people here, have a lot of things they do for the public and public service, and you'll always have those people who will find fault. You always have those people who complain, and sometimes in the most, vicious and horrible ways. Very, very ungrateful, and just all the reasons in the book that you can get angry are fully here for you to, snap out of it. Now, love and vein on them, I'll take the shame, I won't return it. Shame chapasa in mashivim, a person hears and doesn't return, and this merits meichin b'yisur. And it's also, by the way, it's also therapeutic, because when you teach yourself to just ignore and let it pass by, and not need to enter fights, first of all, you save time, and you save mental and emotional energy for bigger and better things. In fact, you make more of a nothing of the person by not even relating to his remark than you do by needing to relate to it. So it's a little bit of play of psychology here, but that's not the point out there. The thing out there here is more bring the point of be bottle, be humble. This is God's will. Take it in. Don't make an issue. No. So that's a true statement of Chazal, that we need to make a din down here in order to prevent the din upstairs. That's usually said regarding monetary matters. That if somebody owes you money. I speak to a lot of people about judicial proceedings to make monetary claims against people that owe them money, and a lot of people always tell me, well, I'm not that type of person, I don't want to take them to court, it's mean, I don't want to. But Chazal say that when there's no din downstairs, there's din up there. So if you really care about this person, if you're telling me the reason why you don't want to take them to court is because you feel bad for them, then if you really feel bad for them, take them to court, because there's going to be din upstairs if you don't take them to court. So, in any event. But regarding this issue of where somebody offended you, what are you supposed to do? The guy has to ask you for forgiveness. If he comes around and does it, he does it. But you answering back and shaming him back is not going to work. Now, what it does say in Chazal also is that if someone did something to offend you, you shouldn't let that build up inside of you and have that offense build up inside of you and dislike the person, as then you come to hate the person, which is another issue. So it says you should be straight up. So if someone has hurt you or offended you, bring it up to them. Tell them, why have you done this? But again, this depends on the situation. If it's something that we cannot just wash over that was done and we need to speak this out, there's obviously nothing wrong with speaking it out. Don't get angry. Don't attack the person back. Just try to work out the specific issue that they did and make amends with that issue that was done. But with, often that's not the case. Often there's no one to talk to. It's not worth getting into the discussion, especially when it's people you don't know. Not everyone is mentally healthy. Let's be honest. Many people are very mentally and emotionally imbalanced, and it doesn't matter if they're from Lubavitch, Chassidishe, Sephardi, not from the Meshuganas are in every group possible. And so, a lot of times these are the people we're dealing with, and when we don't know the person, it's not always the smartest thing over here to adapt that Maimer Chazal. Go tell him why you doing this to me. In this case, just ignore the person, and he'll go on to another Meshagas as his derech the Meshagoyim. He'll leave you alone.
I don't know how to answer the question.
By the way, this is from experience.
Yeah, I know. Sure, I can do a good couple of examples. My question is, how far does it have to go? Like, how much do you have to spend? Like, how much do you have to take?
So what we're going to learn is that in the second phase, after we get through the severity, in the second phase of this discussion, we're going to discuss anger management. And over there's two parts. Part one is dealing with anger as it's already aroused, and part two is preventing the anger to begin with. So the answer to your question is that you do as much as you can to prevent the angry feelings from coming. And there are ways, yes, there are ways of dealing. It's all psychology. Yeah, there's ways of preventing it. There's ways of working. Absolutely, there's ways of working on oneself to be able to prevent it. That's what we're here for tonight. We're going to go through that, and so you do as much as you can based on the techniques and working on yourself over a period of time to prevent taking these things offensively, etc. But if a person's already offended, the feelings are already aroused, and they're not able to do it otherwise, then yes, they may need to adapt that Maimer Chazal, confront the person and work it out. But again, as I'm saying, the other Maimer Chazal is just take the shame and move on, because often these people that do this, they're not someone you can really talk to. Someone you have a relationship with, a parent, a child, a spouse. It's not something you can just let wash over, because you're going to see them tomorrow and you need to speak to them respectfully. So with a person like that, logic dictates it's something if you cannot just wash over, then you should bring it up at a set time, at a calm time, where you're not heated up about the issue. But otherwise, with stam people, then we see this all the time just on the bus. I'm telling you, on the city bus, there's so much you can learn in character, control, task. It's unbelievable. It's like literally, if someone wants to go through a lesson of knowing how to act and what not to do, they should just go on the city bus for a few times. And there's so much you learn from it.
To actually have that initial feeling, and so work hard to just get rid of it, like within a second. For example, let's say you're children break or a really nice lamp, and you invest that one thing that you liked in your house, Eric Pesach, and you're just stressed out already. And
yeah, there's a rule, by the way. There's a rule. Erev Pesach, always something happens in everyone's house. It's a rule. You should just be aware.
I'm just saying, your initial reaction, you just feel like angry, and it's not really that you didn't go crazy.
So let's save step two. We're going to get to step two, okay? To stage two of the discussion, which is management. I understand your question. We're gonna deal both with preventing the initial feeling and how to deal with the initial feeling once it comes. We're gonna do that, but first let's get through the different halachic aspects and severities of anger before we do that. So I'm gonna skip now straight to the Arizal. We can be weeks in discussing sources about anger and reading through amazing Musar, and we have here about 30 pages on Kas and Reishis Chachma, which will make you be here till next Wednesday night straight. Okay, we can have a 24/7 class, but I will spare you and myself the need to do that. Just to know, Reishis Chachma, a great book. The author lives in the city. He's buried in the city. Tzaddikim are alive. Shar Ha'anava, okay, and Shar Ha'anava Perik Beis and Perik Gimel Midas Hakas. The Reishis Chachma, Rav Moshe Eliyahu ben Rav Moshe Zidash. He's buried right next to the Arizal. We also have in the Shulchanaruchharav 4 or 5 pages in Shulchanaruchharav discussing Kas. Great material. Unfortunately, we don't have the time to go through all that. And Reishis Chachma, I'm trying to give just a few bits and pieces of glimpses into the subject, and but that is for further reading on the subject. And that we'll see. That is one of the anger management remedies, is actually to go through the whole Reishis Chachma, go through the whole Shlach Kaddish on these subjects. Sharuch HaKadosh of the Arizal. The Chaim Vital writes the following about the Midah of Kas against for the emphasis of the severity of this character trait, and this is the source of what the Alter stated in the Shulchanaruch codified laws, that when you get angry, you lose your soul. So he writes the following: Gam Midas HaKas, Milvad ma shemenes ha'asaga legamri, aside from the fact that when one gets angry, it completely prevents him from being able to intellectualize, to be able to think. As we find in the verse, it says in Parshas Mates that if Moshe Rabbeinu sent in Parshas Pinchas and Mates, right, because of what happened in Pinchas, so he sent legions, he sent soldiers. They were conscripted to the army to come fight the Midianites, and they didn't do it like his instructions, or like he understood what his instructions were to them, which is to kill all the females. They did not kill all the females, so he got angry. Now it says there that a very strange thing. One of the mitzvahs that is learned from Parshas Matis is the mitzvah of Agalos Keilim, kashering vessels. Well, kashering that we do every Pesach and throughout the year. That we kasher stuff that became treif, it became common stick. That's learned from a pasuk in Parshas Matis. Now, who said that teaching? Who taught Klal Yisrael that idea? Elazar. Elazar. Not the son of Aaron and not Moshe Rabbeinu. Why? So it says it's connected to the previous event, the Yiktzah of Moshe. Since Moshe Rabbeinu got angry, when it now came time for him to teach this to Klal Yisrael, he forgot about it. Completely, it was right afterwards, right? They captured all the vessels. Hashem told Moshe, okay, you're done with your anger, now come teach Klal Yisrael the halachas I told you, and he blanked. He just went blank. You know, the person who comes to do his public speech in front of 500 people and you forget everything, you don't know what you're saying. It's happened to me before. So that's what happened. That's why I always carry a backup topic, just in case. So instead, Elazar had to go ahead and do it, and this is the source of the idea that Kol HaKoyis, it says in the Gemara Psachim, whoever gets angry, if he's a Navi, he loses his prophecy, and if he's a Chacham, he loses his wisdom. Now what if he's neither? He loses his mind. So he says, nonetheless, even though this is quite bad already, it gets a lot worse, says Chaim Vital. And then Merizal, my master and teacher, the Arizal, taught me, listen to what he's testifying about the Holy Ari. The Arizal, says Chaim Vital, was more particular about the sin of anger than all the other sins in the Torah. Even someone who gets angry due to a mitzvah, as was the case with Moshe, he wasn't angry. He was angry because they didn't kill the Midianite woman. And the Rizal gave a reason why he viewed Kas as the worst aveira in the Torah. The reason he gave was because all the other sins in the Torah, because all the other sins in the Torah, they blemish and affect one specific limb. The 248 commands, 365 negative commands, are connected to the different limbs of the body and have effect on different limbs of the body. But it's one specific limb. However, there's one sin that attacks and blemishes all the limbs, and that is the sin of kas, of anger. What's the reason? He explains. It affects and blemishes the entire soul to the point he completely switches it, changes it. And don't get excited. I would like a new soul. Don't get excited about this. As when a person gets angry, his holy soul, the nefesh elikis, says goodbye. I'm out of here. I'm not staying in an angry body. He leaves. Mistalekes mimenu ligamri. And a soul from the side of Klipa comes in its stead. So this is these words Al-Teba didn't say in the Shulchanaruchharav from the Arizal, but here in the original it says that instead of this godly soul that leaves the Jew comes in a tumadika soul, similar to what happens when we sleep. When we sleep, the godly soul goes above, and Bas Melech, the Klipa, the evil spirit of Bas Melech, comes into the body. So when a person gets angry, he loses his godly soul, and then this evil soul comes in him. And that's what you ever notice when you're angry. You just get angrier and angrier and angrier because you have a partnership. You're not alone anymore. This new soul is also inside, and they love anger. The klipas, they live off anger. It's their fuel. When a person gets angry, they receive, that's like a Red Bull. Okay. As in truth, that's what's explained, that evil angels are created from one's kas. And this is a result of the fact that they feed off of this. Continues the Arizal. This is the meaning of the pasuk. You mentioned this already in the Alter Rebbe. As literally the person gets angry, he gives up his holy soul. And he makes it invalid. And he makes it temporarily dead at the time of his anger. And Arizal, because of this, was exaggerated a lot about anger, and he spoke a lot about anger, of how detrimental it is, and how a person has to be careful and stay away from it, to the point that even if you're not angry, but you're dealing with someone who's angry, it's as if you're dealing with Avodah Zarah. Question? Even if a person does tshuva and all these different tikkunim and segulas, and the person gets angry, he loses everything. As at that moment, his holy neshama that he worked on now for so long to fix goes up, disappears. Then his chalefes b'tmeim switches with an impure one. And shar shifcha tmeim kaim, an impure maidservant is in its place. Each time a person gets angry, and it's found that a balakas, the person who has anger management issues on a chronic basis, has no takana at all, because he's always fixing himself and then returning to his mistake, to the damaging results constantly. Okay, so those were pretty harsh words from Arizal. And so again, not only in the Jewish perspective is anger considered a sin and viewed very severely, similar to idolatry. We see, according to Kabbalah, that it causes a person to lose his godly soul, he gets an impure soul. And as the Arizal, the father of Kabbalah, he says this is the worst sin a person could do, is it blemishes the entirety of his neshama. We're going to now go through just a few things that are mentioned regarding the severity of kas from different sources. We're going to do this outside, not inside. Okay, as follows. It's recorded in Sifrei Moser, including Sifrei Arizal, that a person that wants a tikkun for different sins, so back in the day people would fast. People were very serious people. If they one time stumbled on a sin, they would fast a certain amount of fast. And they would never do the sin again, of course, but they wanted to have a tikkun for the sin they already did, so they would fast a certain number of fasts. That's recorded in the Sifrei Moser and Sifrei Kabbalah. So for kas, how many fasts did a person have to do for kas? 161. Puflun Aleph, the Alter Rebbe writes in Tanya Chassidishe, Perek Beis, 151 fasts. It doesn't go very fast. Yes, there is a list. Not in Tanya, he only mentions about 3 or 4, but in the Sifrei Moser, yes, there's a list of many, many sins, the common ones, and the fasts that have to be done as a result. Now, the tikkun for kas, I didn't check to make sure that it's the highest, but it's one of the highest necessities of fasts that one needs to do as a tikkun, even greater than adultery and many other very severe sins. Yes. It even requires more fasts than that. It's, by the way, the gematria of kas with the koil. It's chaf ayin samach is 160. The koil is meaning the extra number of 161. So that's the tikkun for kas. Practically, we don't do this, but I'm bringing this up to explain how severe it is viewed, the idea of anger. There is an inyan of redeeming the fast with money, and there is many different tikkunim that are brought regarding the kas. We're actually not going to be doing this class with tikkunim. We're just going to deal with prevention and management measures. Tikkunim is a class in and of itself, fixing the issue. But one of the best tikkunim is to not do it anymore. Do tshuva. So as we already mentioned, the Gemara in Shabbos, I'm going through a list of things of severity. The Gemara in Shabbos says it's like serving idols. The Gemara Psachim says that Hashem has a special love and relationship with those who don't get angry. We already mentioned that earlier from Chazal regarding the tzaddikim who don't shame back those who shame them. We mentioned that the neshama leaves the body. We mentioned a person loses his wisdom and forgets his Torah learning as a result. It's from the Gemara Psachim. The Gemara Psachim 66b also says that one who gets angry gets demoted from his position. A leader, a Jewish leader, a political leader who gets angry, or a rabbi, he gets demoted from his position. Now, this can either mean that literally he gets deposed, or that people stop holding of him, which is similar. The Reishis Chachma writes that similar, based on what we read before in the Arizal, that when a person is angry, you shouldn't look at his face. It's also to look at the face of the Rasha, and it's also to look at the face at Avodah Zarah. So since it's similar to Avodah Zarah at this time, and he's embellishing this idolatry spirit that he's bringing into his body during anger, a person shouldn't look at an angry person. Sometimes you want to look, you just get amused at this person going crazy on the bus about some nonsense, going absolutely nuts. Don't look at the guy, don't stare, don't look. That's a good lesson you can learn from the New York subway. New York subway, you have every meshugana on earth going through that. And everyone's crazier than the next, and nobody looks at each other. Everyone is in their own little booth, their own little seat, no one pays attention. Don't even look at the face of the Russia at this time, that moment that he's losing control. Person, well, when at the stage of anger, at the time of anger, a person is certainly a Russia, gives him his godly soul. I'm trying to think of the order we should do this in. In going on the effects that it has, so let's talk about a little bit the behavioral effects or the physiological effect on the body, what happens according to science during times of anger. So what is brought down in the leading clinical studies on anger is the following. But during anger, the brain shuts away from the gut and towards the muscles. And in preparation for this basically it's an exertion of adrenaline, the heart rate and blood pressure and respiration increase. The body temperature rises and the skin begins to perspire. The following very fancy words are medical words. I'm going to read you the following that's brought down regarding how anger affects the brain. So it's a 5-step process of anger. The first, right, anger is a crazy adrenaline. It's we have to admit, no matter how you look at anger, it's something that's it's something beholding. It's like something has taken over you. It brings out parts of you that you don't believe in, that ever existed. Often, obviously, negative, but nonetheless, it's something that's like something is taking you over. So there's actually something physiological happening in the brain that causes this to happen. So the order is as follows. The first spark of anger activates the, I think this is pronounced amygdala, before you're even aware of it. The amygdala activates the hypothalamus. Did I lose anyone? The hypothalamus signals the pituitary gland by discharging, forgive me on this word, corticotropin. I'm not pronouncing it right, but that's the word here. Releasing hormone. The pituitary activates the adrenal glands by releasing, another fancy word, adrenocorticotropic hormone, and the adrenal glands secrete stress hormones like cortisol, adrenaline, and noradrenaline. That's the 5 steps that happens literally in our brain. So that's a lot going on when we get angry, and so we see it's that's like someone who's on a diet. That's like 5 cans of Coke and a huge cheeseburger. Point is that this has a real physical effect on the brain, and that's why they as well bring that these effects, chronic anger can have permanent effects on one's blood pressure. It can have permanent effects on one's cholesterol. Yeah, really. There's relationship between high cholesterol, which of course is related to heart disease, stroke, and all the other illnesses that we should never know of. And it says that there's a connection between this effect, this whole 5-step process in the brain, and clogging of arteries. You can look this up in all these studies that I read. And so these are things that have long-term effects, but it's also short-term effects. It was published in an English newspaper in 1953. I believe it was 53. The day after, a few days after, the day after that they publicized that Stalin, Ymach Shemai, died, croaked. So an English newspaper published an article by an English journalist who worked for the newspaper, who had spoken to an inner source. I read the article in 1953. They had a clipping of it. That had spoken to what I believe was the foreign minister at that time of the Russian government of how Stalin died. So I know this is one version. There's many versions, and probably nobody will ever know because it's Russia. So, why tell the truth if you don't have to? So in any event, but this is the version that was printed the day after he died in this famous English newspaper. I forgot the name of the paper, but in any event, so what the guy wrote from his source in the Russian government is that at that time, as we know, Stalin was planning the doctor's plot to eradicate the Jewish community, the millions upon millions of Jews living in Russia. And he had ordered the Minister of Interior of his government to go ahead and start acting on this order of the doctor's plot. And the Minister of Interior flat out refused him. Now, we all know the history of Stalin. You refuse Stalin, you die. I mean, even if you don't refuse him, you die. Certainly if you do refuse him, you die. So basically what the person said is that when Stalin, he basically told Stalin that he can't do it. The world, this is right after the Holocaust, the world will destroy us. Look what happened with the Jews over there. What are they going to do to us now? He said Stalin got so angry, he never heard of anyone to his face telling him no. He said he got so angry, he literally had a heart attack and died on the spot. This is what this newspaper wrote. So he died as a result of his anger of not being able to kill the Jews.
Well, actually, he lingered for several days, and he got very poor medical care because all the Jewish doctors, who were the best doctors in the country, were in prison.
Right. So, as I said, there's many versions. Well, the version I've always heard is that he actually died that very day, as it says in that newspaper article, and they just didn't want to release it for 3 days for whatever reason. But again, we will, when it comes to Russia, we will never know obvious Mashiach Tzedekenu. Okay, 2 stories that we will now mention, living to the test of what we read before in the Shulchanaruch, being shamed and not shaming back, of 2 different Pekudei Yisrael who exemplified this. Many stories, but this is just 2 that I chose, both from Yerushalayim, of this idea, as we said before, that the tzaddikim, they don't get angry even when they are shamed. This is what Dr. is really touching upon. Anger is the defense mechanism that the personality and a person's soul stretches out, shoots out, when they feel they were unrightfully hurt or unrightfully shamed, etc. And so a person works on himself, he learns to just take it and not answer that. So we have one story that occurred with a sweet Jewish mother, Jewish mama living in the Yishuv Hayashan in Yerushalayim in the late 1800s. Unfortunately, she did not yet have any children. They married a number of years to her husband, no kids yet. And she had a very, very jealous neighbor for whatever reason, and jealous of their home or whatever it was. And this neighbor would always, but basically was a bad neighbor, shochin. Now, one time, this came to the epitome of the evil of this neighbor. She had just finished doing laundry. She would do laundry for the yeshiva bachman. She had just finished doing, 2 days worth of laundry. Back then, there were no machines. So you understand how hard it was to do laundry. Literally, every piece of clothing was energy, exertion. So she finished putting up, tens and tens of articles of clothing after cleaning them and putting them up to dry. And this evil neighbor comes. She lived on an upper story, and she basically spilled an entire cup of coffee or other black colored liquid all over the clothing purposely, viciously. At least by us it's not viciously. This was viciously that it was done. And this Giveret, this Shemama, not yet a mother as we said, wife, didn't get angry, didn't do anything, simply went and took the clothing, and once again rewrapped it up and didn't get angry at this one. Her husband heard the whole story, and he was, first of all, he was very upset, and he was also quite shocked at his wife's very calm demeanor. I mean, I think even if we just did laundry in the washing machine, we would get quite upset, even if it wasn't tens of articles of clothing. And this woman just took it in. And basically, the Rav at that time, I believe it was Shmuel Salant, gave her a bracha that in merit of this you merit to have a great Talmid Chacham, a great Torah scholar as a son. And indeed, she did give birth in the late 1800s to a child, many years into marriage. And that son was Shalom Yosef Elyashiv, Yashiv from Yerushalayim, famous Pesach. Another story is with Rav Zevin, another late Jerusalem personality. He was a Lubavitcher Chassid, actually. Kapasta Chassid became Lubavitcher Chassid. And he, in the beginning years, was an ardent Zionist. He, not the Kippah Sruga, but the philosophy. He was a tremendous Torah giant of uncomparable caliber, genius in Torah. But he had Zionistic beliefs, Chalta de Gul, etc. So, as you know, he lived in Meishar. Living in Meishar, and you're not living with the people the most accepting of that type of philosophy. So it'd be all the time that people would protest against him, people would throw things at him, sometimes would walk on the street. So one time he was walking on the street with his sons, and someone, no more, no less, took a whole bunch of rotten bananas and threw them out of Zevin. The mushy ones, like almost mashed, like children can eat. And he got full of he looked like a banana fruit salad, and he went out to clean himself up. Zevin was a big belt stock. I don't know if he had personal cash, but he had access to monies. And every week, one day a week, he would distribute stock to people. People would wait online, and he would give out. Lo and behold, on that day that he was giving stock to different paupers, who comes on the line to ask for a charity donation? The banana thrower. Sons are looking, oh boy, Dad's going to get this guy. Now is our time, payback time, as they say. His father, as if oblivious of who the person is, heard what he's here for, and he gave him a donation. He gave him a certain amount of money. As he was leaving, the sons went to him, Father, Tata, do you know who this guy is? This is the banana thrower. He said, oh, it's true. Call him back. So he says, now we're going to get it. And the father of Zevin, Yosef Zevin, went and said, here is another donation. He gave him a second donation. The sons asked him, we don't understand what's going on. So he said, at least he knew who to throw the bananas on. But this is, at least he knew who to throw the bananas on. It's a real story. It's a real nice thing that happened. This is a type of Ehrlichkeit, a type of tzidkus, righteousness that is not just for the storybooks, but is something to try to exemplify, something to emulate, something to try to reach to the little bit of level, that we don't have to have the false secular attitude of payback, revenge, avenge, offend back. And that it's permitted to get offended and just let it roll. It's permitted.
Those same adrenal fatigue and high cortisol happens to the person who's the receiver. Not necessarily anger, but of all kinds of abuse. So to prevent that from happening, you have to figure out a way not to respond and not let it.
So that's why I said we're going to have two phases when we deal with anger management very soon: prevention and management. The prevention will prevent those things from happening. So we're going to get to that. Before we move on to the anger management course, halachic, Musaric, and Kabbalistic anger management course, let's first get to, are there any times that anger is kind of permitted? We said before it's never permitted, but what about in the case for the sake of students or parents, educational purposes? So we did mention already in the Alter Rebbe that it's that a person can only outside he can show his anger, but from the inside he has to always be calm. And the Alter Rebbe emphasizes this more again in the continuation of that halacha, even regarding a Talmud Chacham that was shamed. He should not seek a vengeance back. He should just be quiet. The Alter basically says like this, something very interesting. He says that if a Talmud Chacham is shamed and embarrassed by one of the people, he should not respond. He should not respond to that person. Nevertheless, he's going to get punished for Bizayin HaTorah. Since the Torah scholar represents Torah, and he was shamed for his Torah. Therefore, by him not answering back, which the Alter is telling him not to, don't answer back, he's going to get punished for letting the Torah be shamed. However, if someone else comes to speak up in the person's defense, in the scholar's defense, and to fight his war, then the person and the Torah scholar is not allowed to tell him to be quiet. He shouldn't protest him. As in this, it says that a Talmud Chacham is not neikim v'neiter kanachash. That is not. This, of course, can be taken out of context, unfortunately, but that he doesn't seek to vengeously protect his stature of Torah scholarship for the sake of the Torah. Then he's not considered a real Torah scholar because he doesn't respect the Torah. It's not. He views it as just like, okay, so you insulted my driving, insulted me, a big deal. No, it should be important. It should be looked at. But he's saying, nonetheless, this is only in terms of someone else coming and not protesting them, defending your behavior, but you yourself shouldn't answer back. So that's just another point over there regarding, in spiritual terms, is anger permitted. It says here that a person himself should not respond back. In Hilchos Talmud Torah, the Alter Rebbe brings regarding teachers with students and similarly with parents and children. So obviously one of the most opportune and common times that anger is the emotion is brought up is teachers with students, especially nowadays, and parents with children, especially with a lot of children that are making trouble. And so in this case, it says the following: that here too, kas, anger is an absolute prohibition. A person does not get any extra license during these periods, even though obviously it's more challenging. Obviously, it is, we completely understand the circumstances that ignite the anger. There are a lot more, but a person has to know that that ideally there is a way, as the Torah doesn't demand of us things that are impossible. There is a way to eventually, it doesn't work overnight, but to eventually come to a state that we lessen and lessen and lessen those explosions, those adrenaline rushes in the brain. I'll just call it short, the five-step adrenaline brain process, right? There is a way to prevent all that from happening, and therefore the Torah does not give one a license even in those situations. What it does say is that a person obviously is able to educate and punish and sometimes even hit a child for the sake of education, but it should never, God forbid, be from that angry feeling and a way of him releasing and relieving his emotions of anger. The Gemara in Maseches Saita brings that the anger of a parent in a home destroys the home. Kas charav beis. The kas can destroy a home, something that's very dangerous for the home, and this is also explained scientifically. They did studies on plants, live plants in pots, that were in near people that had major anger management issues, and they were very calm people, and they saw a vast difference in the growth of the plants, even though they were treated and watered the same exact way day after day. The plant in the very calm home grew beautiful flowers sprouted, while the other plant was always with a frown. Didn't get up, didn't have, in any event. They have a few studies on this subject of the effects of plants on anger, but they feel that energy.
You did one also where they said to one that you're beautiful.
Right,
you're
criticizing the plants. This is.
That one I haven't tried. Another thing that is also understood is that anger brings anger. Anger is fire. We said before, it's Misayda-ish. When one person gets angry, they think, oh, since I'm getting angry, now I'm in control. They don't realize there's another person. So when one person gets angry, that can ignite the fire in the other person. Now you have two people angry, then you have three people angry, four people angry, and then the whole house is out of control. It's like a conflagration that it just keeps growing and growing and growing. With that said, to conclude this subject of the severity and prohibition of anger before we get to a little bit of more encouraging messages of how to deal with it. Right? This is, by the way, Musar. When you hear Musar, you feel terrible. How bad the trade is, and how terrible it is. So now we're going to move on more to the Chassidishe, which is, so how do we get rid of it? How do we deal with it? Let's leave all the bad with regret, for specific times. But obviously, knowing the severity shakes up a person to be able to then, know that there's something they need to work on. A lot of times in life, we don't like, some people like running away from facing issues because it's just too much. But they don't realize that the too much is going to be later on the line because you didn't deal with this. So it's much better face it now, understand now what's going on, understand now what the problem is, what the severity is with it, so you can try treating it already early. In any event, so the last thing I want to conclude here is something very interesting, as we find Reb Baruch of Mezhedish, a very interesting personality. He was the grandson, the great-grandson of the Baal Shem Tov. The grandson of the Baal Shem Tov. He was the grandson of the Baal Shem Tov. He took over the Baal Shem Tov in Mezhedish. He had a tradition from Tolkos Yaakov Yosef and others that he was the heir of the Baal Shem Tov's line of Moiras, of rebbehood, of leadership. And the Chalal, it's known that he had a, if you want to call anger management issues in spiritual terms, he had tremendous spiritual anger management issues. He was a very angry person, and he had the famous Badchan joker that would come and Uri I forgot the name of the place he was from, that came and would make jokes for him to make him happy. But he was known to have a very, very fiery anger. He would speak against Rabbi Yitzchak Barditchev with such fiery terms. There's a lot of stories that go back and forth. But in any event, this was what all the tzaddikim explained, that this anger of Reb Baruch was not the anger of an angry truck driver. It wasn't the anger of someone angry at a spouse, but it was a kedushadik anger. It was a holy anger. And you have some tzaddikim, some very special, unique tzaddikim, that anger is something that is okay with them. Again, this is something very unique because it goes against everything we just learned, that it's never okay, that Rizal said it's the worst. So it's not very clearly understood, okay, but we do have a source for this, and the source is in the Zohar. The Zohar in Chelik Aleph, page Kuf Pei Dalet, says the following: there's anger and there's anger. There's two types of angers. Isrugza. There is a type of anger that it is a blessing from above. Now they say that when he passed away, when Baruch Mezhedish passed away, they found him in a state of where he passed away, that his head was on the Zohar, and the Zohar was open to this page, where it says that there's two angers, and there's an anger that is blessed. That was his name, Baruch. His name was Baruch. And there's a blessed anger. One time, when he heard someone speaking bad or making fun of the Yitzchak Barditchev, he got very, very angry at the Chassid, and he told the Chassid he's not going to have a chelik in his mouth. He told him some very severe things. He said, "What do you mean? You do this all the time?" He says, "You don't understand. The reason why I get angry and say these things against Rebbe Levi is because his Aveda is so holy and so high that he causes tremendous persecution from the Malachi Asharis. And in order to get them out of the way, I get angry and I make, basically with my anger, I do these spiritual maneuvers to stop the attacks of the Malachi Asharis and the Yisrael." So this was a very holy anger, and nobody could say, "Well, Reb Baruch of Mezhedish used to get angry." Become Reb Baruch and then get angry, but don't first get angry and then talk about becoming Reb Baruch. Okay, so let's begin. Anger management. So, as the Rebbe points out in the letter, something very obvious but very important to mention, this is a step-by-step progress program. It is not overnight. You suddenly get a pill, an intellectual, we get some kind of a charm that you can just say when you're angry, and poof, it's gone as if it was never there. Unbelievable. If only life was that simple regarding everything. But God put us in this world to work and work hard, and nothing disappears momentarily. These things that we're going to learn step by step, day by day of training and work. One thing's for certain. A person will not work on anger management if he doesn't take the steps to do it. Nothing will happen on its own. The person has to do something. He has to be vigilant, and he has to be on top of it, just like dieting. You're not going to lose weight if you don't diet. You have to actually go ahead and exercise. You have to actually go ahead and diet. And the same thing here. So, but the good news is that there is, and Chazal teach us a lot of different steps and and things to counter anger that we can do and deal with anger once it's already occurred. And we're going to call this 12-step program because it's 12 different pieces of advice. Okay. So let's begin. Number one is a general matter, which is here to help prevent the anger from getting aroused to begin with. So we're going to learn throughout these 12 things that some of these are meant to deal with the anger when it's already aroused, while some of them are there more as preventive measures to prevent things. The main thing of preventing anger from ever becoming aroused to begin with is, once again, knowing the root where it comes from. I said before, it comes from yeshus, it comes from daivin. And when a person works on being more nullifying, having more bittul, then he'll see that his anger will diminish. Now, how does a person work on bittul? So there's many ways of working on bittul. And that's a discussion in of its own. But, one of the things is a scoffing. When a person doesn't give into himself different pleasures that he wants, so when a person doesn't give in to, whenever a person gives in to different pleasures, it strengthens that person's ego. It strengthens that person's yeshus. And even though right now we don't see a correlation between that and next week's anger flare when someone did something, there is a correlation, because the more that a person strengthens his self-perception, his occupation of self, the more anger gets justified. So the first step and the most general principle of dealing with anger is really dealing with the root of it, which is the idea of yeshus, which is dealt with in many different ways. One of them is a skafia. Another one is by having cheshbon nefesh. The Rebbe gave a prescribed program. Every Thursday night, a person should do a cheshbon nefesh and really beat himself up and feel bitter for how distant he is from God, and how low he is. Feeling low once in a while, feeling spiritually empty, is not good for the normal avodas Hashem. But I'm giving different options. Obviously, if the shoe fits, wear it. This is not we're here to give out everything that's available, and everyone can choose the night and the time and which ones work for them. So when a person, though, has that state of merirus, let's say in davening, where he makes himself feel shtal ruach, low before Hashem, and brings it to a real humble state, that gets affected later. That when someone offends you, you don't get so offended because my ego is lower. My ego is less sticking out. Once again, we discussed this last week. Okay, anger is the result of that I have expectations, and those expectations were not met. Whatever those expectations are. If I'm expecting someone, let's make believe right now, all of us right now are preparing for someone. I'm telling you right now, future, tomorrow when you go on the bus, someone will go over to you and say, you are really stupid and ugly. I'm telling you right now, someone's going to do that on the bus. And everyone should prepare now. How many of you would get angry if I already told you what's going to happen at exactly 11:30 on the bus? You would be very calm because you already know this is going to happen. You already know what the person's going to do. And you already know that this is, so you have the time to prepare. Basically, it has to do with expectation. Expectation, when a person expects someone to not go ahead and ever call him a name, that no one has ever the right to go ahead and do this to me, when they go in and do it, automatically, because that expectation was broken, we have the flare-up. We have the automatic attack. One of the ways of preventing the feeling of anger even coming up is to lower the expectation, or to also expect the worst. Meaning, if I prepare myself before I enter public service, or anyone entering a job, and many jobs are public service. Not all jobs deal just with you and your boss. Many jobs deal with the public. And when you deal with the public, you have all walks of life, and not always is it fun, enjoyable, and justifiable. Many people are very, very mean and do things that are very unjustifiable to people, to public servants, or anyone in a job dealing with the public. So if you prepare yourself beforehand, let's say a politician, and all politicians do this, and we should learn from them. They get letters after letters of thousands of people complaining, saying the worst things, I'm going to kill you, I'm going to assassinate you, or you're horrible. All these things. How do they manage? Because they learn first of all, they prepare to expect it and to ignore it. They don't even get upset about it. They don't even bother. Only some people, some presidents do. But most people, most real politicians, and that's what makes them a politician, is that they are able to just shrug this off. They completely ignore the remarks. And once again, this is expectation that the person prepares himself for the idea. The Alter Rebbe brings in Torah based on the pasuk in Mishlei, Shlomo HaMelech. The Shlomo states in Mishlei, Proverbs chapter 15, Meine raka meshivchem. A soft reply dissipates anger. What does this mean? What this means is as follows. The Alter Rebbe explains it in two ways. That when a person is angry, if I speak to him very softly, very calmly, that will help dissipate his anger. But if I get angry back, if I ignite my fire, that will make a bonfire. When a person answers softly back to the person who's angry, that will help eventually. That's like throwing water onto his fire. Now, as we know, when you have a bonfire and throw water, it doesn't go out 1 second. It'll take maybe 10 minutes, 15 minutes. It'll go out eventually. When you answer back with anger, then it'll be a huge conflagration, and it could take hours to put out. And the Alter Rebbe explains also, goes the other way, that when you're angry, speak softly. Force yourself to speak softly. The voice, the soft, calm voice, is like it's like a medicine, forcing the person to calm down his adrenaline. Remember, this is all those 5 steps happening in the brain. How do we get it to stop? Speaking softly helps put that in. You're telling the brain, this isn't an emergency. Relax. Save the adrenaline for something else. So this Alter brings that it's not. Most people understand it as a soft tongue dissipates anger. To the person who's angry, you should speak in a soft tongue. So this Chiddush in Torah is that no, for you yourself. We had a whole class not too long ago on speech and the power of speech. And how speech is an amazing tool that we have that we don't use enough. We only use it for other people. We have to start talking to ourselves more. And who cares what people think, right? But we have to start talking to ourselves for the effects that talking has on our motivations, right? On our motivations and our feelings. And so this too, when a person talks softly to himself in the state of anger, it helps calm himself down. And so do with all character traits. All character traits, if you talk to yourself out of it, it'll help you get out of the attack, get out of the state of mind. And this is like was brought in one of the Rebbe's letters, that a person should tell himself to relax. Tell yourself to calm down, relax, calm down. You tell yourself that. Not the other person tell you that that sometimes makes the person even more angry. That sometimes could be. We have to view it like this: when a person is angry and we're around them, we literally here have a bonfire. We have to know what to throw in to put it out. So not all liquids work. Some liquids are gasoline and make the fire worse. So we have to throw in water. So we have to know what is water that calms it down. So one of the things, as we said, the person talks to himself to calm down, muttering under his breath. Number 3. 1 was dealing with the source and root of anger, which is Yeshus. Number 2 is speaking softly. Number 3 is brought in the letter of the Rebbe, two different parts. Number one, again, dealing with speech. Another option of rather than speak softly is the following, that when a person is angry, a person should never verbalize that anger. Meaning that if you're angry about something, now is not the time to talk about it. Save it for another date. Now, we're not always able to do this, but quite often we are, especially in a home with children. The child did something wrong, we got very angry. We can, very simple advice, put the child away, put the child in a room, put yourself away, get yourself out of the situation, and don't speak about the anger, don't verbalize your anger at this state, because it will make it worse. When we speak, just like we said that a soft tongue softens the anger, a hard tongue will cause it to ignite even more. That is feeding its fuel. So therefore, on the other hand, not only should a person speak softly, but he should never ever verbalize the anger, because that will make it grow. I will also advise people that they shouldn't speak for some time. Meaning, like, take 2 weeks off. Take a little bit of time off. Take 5 minutes, 10 minutes. Just don't talk to anyone. Just quiet. Don't talk to anyone. Let the anger dissipate. That is another way of dealing with it, of helping the conflagration go away. Number 4 is advised in many, many, many letters of the Rebbe, and this is twofold. It both deals with preventive and it deals with putting out the fire. And that is contemplating God's presence. The Rebbe advised many people dealing with anger that have anger management issues, that they should memorize, place to memory at the beginning of chapter 41 in Tanya, Perek Mem, it speaks about how God is everywhere and God is judging you and He's looking inside your emotions and your feelings and how you are. And this idea that you're not alone, that God is everywhere where you are, and we'll connect that soon to Hashgacha Pratis. That's next. But this is even outside Hashgacha Pratis, the fact that God is everywhere. When a person contemplates that idea of God's presence, he has that fear that he won't bring himself to anger. Like, for example, we see this all the time, that in privacy, a person is much more prone to anger than in public. Why? Because in public, other people are looking. So we're sort of trying to keep the lid on, as they say. And therefore, we don't allow things to get out of control. And sometimes we don't even get angry because just the fear of the public prevents the feeling of anger from getting expressed. So we don't even get angry. It's not a matter of we're angry, but we're just controlling. So we don't even get the feeling doesn't even come. So a person that contemplates God's, and so obviously this is something the Rebbe prescribed to people to do outside of anger. The person who wants to work on anger would memorize Perek Mem, the first section of Perek Mem, Tanya, and review it constantly, having this constantly in his mind. And then they're prescribed that if a person does get angry, then he should go ahead and repeat it very softly. Say it, this chapter, the section of this chapter that he learned, he will recite it from memory. And that will help dissipate the anger. Number 5, another advice given by the Rebbe, and this is what the Alter Rebbe writes in Geras HaKodesh, Epistle 25, letter 25 in this page for the Alter Rebbe, printed in Tanya, and that is contemplating divine providence. And here is where we come to a very, we're going to have a little bit of discussion on this, there's a lot of different ways, channels of how to go about this, which is basically an intellectual way of telling yourself not to get angry and to calm down. So let's first read it in time, then I'll go into a little further. Chapter 25, the Alter Rebbe here is discussing that there was a statement written in Tzivos HaRivash that the opponents of the Chassidic movement, the Misnagdim, took issue with, and this letter is coming to defend that statement of the Baal Shem Tov. And he writes as follows. We can understand the statement properly through first introducing the Maimer Chazal, Kol HaKoyes Kilu Eved Avei B'Zon. Whoever gets angry, it's as if they serve idolatry. Now why? We said this earlier, and we said we're going to get to it. Why is it considered like idolatry? Is this just an exaggeration, or is there an actual correlation between anger and idolatry? That time movement, the Yedei Bina, the reason is understood to those who know, who have understanding. As a time that a person gets angry, his trust and belief in Hashem disappears. If a person honestly believed that what just occurred to him, this expectation or lack of expectation that didn't happen, or that did happen, what he wanted didn't take place, he never expected someone to offend him, and he did. Whatever it is that is now causing this shock in the brain, if you would believe that that very same moment that happened, that Hashem Haisazai said, this is from God, this is God making it happen. Meaning the second that I start getting upset, this is from God. Hashem Haisazai, he wouldn't get angry, it's Hashem's doing. Even if it's a person who has freedom of choice, a Jew who's cursing him or hitting him, or stealing his money, he becomes liable in court. So it's not like we're saying, oh, it's always God, it's not the victim, like you said before, like the Christians, oh, go forgive and hug the murderer of your relative. So even though we're not saying that, and the person is going to be liable in Dina Shemayim and Dina Adam for his bad bechira, but you should not get angry at what he did. Why? Because it's coming from the Eibishter. The Eibishter already, Nizakvar, Nigzim Neshamayim. He already decreed upon you for this to happen. So the fact that they're doing it has nothing to do with the fact that it's happening to you. The fact that it's happening to you is because God destined that this needs to happen to you for the reasons that He knows best. So if we penetrate this message and this idea all the time, that we're ready. And remember I said prepare for the guy in the bus, or the person in the bus is going to shame you, you're going to be ready, you're not going to get angry because you're prepared. So too, we can prepare for all these unexpected situations. Whenever an unexpected situation comes up, we tell ourselves and we imbue ourselves before Him with Hashgacha Pratis, the belief in Hashem, and that's the truth. The person who's walking around with 100% emunah in Hashem and Hashgacha Pratis. So anger has no place. It's God. What are you going to anger? There's nothing to anger about. It's all God. There's bad, 100%. There's bad people make bad decisions to you, to do things to you that you are hurting from. But don't think for a second that only happened because of that. It would have happened regardless. Hashem has a lot of messengers that He could have made this happen, and this individual chose to be the emissary of doing this. But Hashem has many messengers. It would have happened regardless. The loss, whatever happened right now, was already decreed. Whatever happened right now was already decreed. So when a person contemplates that this is God's hands doing it, and not the person who he's viewing as the perpetrator, so he'll remove his anger from the perpetrator and get angry at God. So that's the question. So, okay, I understand how maybe this helps us divert the anger from that person. So this was really God's decision, and you're just the messenger. But should we get angry at God? And over here, this comes to the second part, that everything God does for the best. He doesn't punish us for the sake of anger or punishment. He's doing it all as a refining. So strengthening our belief in Hashem's constant presence, which is the previous step 4, and strengthening ourselves as, in addition to that, of divine providence and the Hashgacha Pratis. Again, we can say this a million times and it won't change one thing. This is something you have to live. You have to penetrate each day. You have to think about this each day. You have to get into the mode of really living it. And the way to do it is, as Chassidim would do, is to say it Baal Peh, is to every single day take 3 minutes and review these things by heart, these ideas by heart. And that gives you the ammunition to deal with the challenges as they come up during the day. As they come up during the day, you're already prepared for them. You're already trained for them. And you're already ready. This is divine providence. And you know what? Even if it doesn't work throughout the whole day, you manage to get through 7 situations, and then that last kid, that's it, I'm done. But you still manage 7. It's progress. It's progress. We got somewhere.
So what, you're supposed to expect the worst?
No, you know what? It's not called expect the worst, but it's called let God run your day. Throw your expectations aside. Let God run your day. Literally, the idea that we create our schedule, it's a shtickle kfir. There's a little bit of heresy involved in that because, we have to try to create our schedule, but to think that literally we are the decision makers of our schedule and what comes up is complete heresy. It's God that decides. God runs our world, and we have to leave a window open for God to run it a little differently than us sometimes. And if we don't leave that window open, that's when we go crazy. It's when we explode.
שנים אחורה, שנים אחורה, היה רב בהרצליה שאני הייתי הולכת אליו עם כל השאלות של המשפחה, והחכם ססי, היום יש מקווה על שמו, והוא עזב מאוד מאוד על שמו, היה ממש צדיק. ואז יום אחד ישבתי מולו ובכיתי, זה קרוב, ממש בכיתי. זאת אומרת, אני לא רוצה לראות, זה חוסר אמונה. בכי לא בא בחשבון. ואז איכשהו אני הבנתי גם שאותו דבר בכעס. משום שאין על מה לפקוד ואין על מה לכעוס. כי הכל מאת השם והכל טוב. ולמה? זה ראשי תיבות של לימוד מאת השם. אנחנו צריכים לראות מה אנחנו צריכים ללמוד ומה התיקון.
Yeah, so regarding anger, it's definitely true. Crying is actually brought in Chazal, that it's a good thing and therapeutic. But regarding anger, that's what we're learning right now, absolutely. So, so this idea that, however, we can make it a little more concrete. The general idea is again, and the Rebbe told us to many people. If we had time, I'd read through all the letters because it emphasizes the point more. But we don't have time, so I'm just telling you that many letters of people asking advice to the Rebbe regarding anger management, these are the things that he would prescribe. As I said before, memorizing by heart chapter 41, which is the idea of God's presence, daily contemplating it, preparing oneself with the situations. The next part that also is the letter that we just read, that first section about Hashgacha Pratis, and that it's Hashem doing it, is already decreed upon you. And again, reviewing that on a daily basis. Now, we can take it a step further that, not only contemplating how God does everything for your benefit spiritually, but also sometimes very physically things end up being for your benefit. We don't even notice. Let's say there's traffic or we miss the bus. Our natural feeling is to get upset and get angry and get fed up. And I'm not saying not to send letters of complaint to the bus service. That's fine to do, but we don't have to get ourselves angry because of that. We don't have to ruin our day and our time. There's so many people that they start off their day, something happened on the way to work, and their whole day is shot now because they explode and get. It's very traumatic anger. It's also physically traumatic. We don't realize it. When we get angry, we are releasing those 5 stages where you think you can just release 5 stages and continue the day as normal. All those 5 fancy word stages that we said that are happening inside the brain needs to recover afterwards. And literally, that's why after people get angry, it's like my day is shot. I gotta lie down. I need a rest. I need to sleep. I can't focus anymore because the brain is all screwed up. So one of the things that will help a person is when he contemplates as well how these things may be of some benefit for you. And there's a lot of things that happen in life that we normally may get upset about, but in truth, think of it in the long run, these things we have seen in the past, how they benefited us, even physically, not even talking about spiritually, Hashgacha Pratis and the Gamazul Taiva for betterment of your soul, which we'll discuss next, but in a very physical sense. And so therefore, once again, we should have also that basic emunah of letting God run our day, because he knows also what's physically best for us, and leaving that window open, as we said. We're going to go a little quick because we have a lot of time left. Number 6 is Kaparat Ovanot. I'll tell you discussed in Zegeres Tshuva Yud Aleph, where this is a subcategory of 5, and that is that even if you don't see any physical materialistic benefit out of this happening right now, this is just extra stress in my day, and I don't see on earth any logical explanation how this is going to be beneficial for me. Nonetheless, so even if a person doesn't have that belief of Gamzu L'Tayv in the physical world, at least he'll view it as this is an atonement for one's sins. Alter Rebbe writes this in Haggadah Parak Yud. Let's read it inside the words. He says over there in chapter 11, that when a person views his sins in front of him constantly, this just goes back to what we said before about being humble and viewing yourself in a low spirit. When a person views his sins in front of him constantly, then this will help him avoid getting angry and having kas and kpeda. So this is a good way, a good psychological counterattack to tell yourself, to prevent yourself from getting upset and angry. You tell yourself, I deserve these things. And these are all to refine me and refine my character and refine my sins. This is why, this explains the Alter Rebbe, we said earlier, the one who takes the shame and doesn't answer back gets that special treatment in the future. It's not just because he did a very great thing at this moment, but furthermore, because that shame that he experienced, that cleansed his soul. And if people who always have to attack back, they don't receive the cleansing because they shoot right back. They need to satiate their revenge, and therefore they don't let the cleansing happen. But a person who just lets the cleansing happen and doesn't say anything back, so that cleanses the person's soul.
That's the best.
Breslov Chassidus emphasizes this a lot. Where you take bizyonis, you can take embarrassments, and they actually have a whole idea of viewing it as these are the zichuchim that the soul needs. So therefore, they're not they already think the idea or schedule the idea that people will embarrass or shame, etc. And this is all. And they thank you so much for refining my soul. Thank you. Like I'm not trying to refine you, but you are.
סליחה, זה לא רק זה, יצא לי לדבר עם אח שלי, כשאני עומדת מול בן אדם שלא מתנהג כמו בן אדם, ואני נשארת מענץ', אין דבר יותר טוב בזה. זה לא רק התנהגות, זה באמת להישאר, להיות בן אדם.
Okay, but I understand what you're saying, but often what happens is that when I'm going to be the man here, I'm going to let them get angry and I'm going to be more of the macho one. That's a good thing to do, but at the same time, we don't want it to be that more of an ego. Like, because my ego is so strong, I'm not even going to respond. This guy is an absolute nothing. It is an attitude, but a lot of the secular advices that are given in the secular anger management non-per Chazal courses, there's a lot of very things that may work, but they're very anti-Torah and definitely anti-Chassidus ideas of where it's more all about you. It turns it more all about you. But anyway, I can't take any more questions or comments till we finish. We have 9 minutes left, and we have still a lot to do. Okay, Number 7. This is from the Pele Yates. I would love to read it inside, but we're short of time. You can look it up in Pele Yates in Erech Kas, where the Pele Yates basically writes the following: that one of the great ways of anger management, of dealing with anger. Again, this is in both preventing the feeling from coming and dealing with at the moment is the following: write a doctorate on it. Write a doctorate on it. Write a PhD paper. Okay, this is an amazing advice for not just anger, for anything, but he writes it regarding anger. Okay, and when you begin writing, when you begin studying and researching a subject, I don't care what the subject is, it can be about sunflowers. You will start feeling like a sunflower. You will start literally living sunflower. When Tlushkin, who wrote a recent biography of the Rebbe, he said that while he wrote his book, he's not a chassid, but he felt so close to the Rebbe. And even though he doesn't write as a chassid and he doesn't write all the admirable things all the time, sometimes he puts in his own 2 cents. Nonetheless, he felt that he never felt so close. He felt closer than any chassid could ever feel. Because when you're involved for 2 years in all this research, and you begin living, you begin connecting with the person. And so too, when a person writes a doctorate and he goes through all the sources, this is what he says, right? Go through all the sources in Chazal, Rishis, Chachma, go through everything on the subject, and don't just learn it on a relaxed on your sofa. Write about it, organize it, put it on paper, literally write a PhD, write an essay on the subject. You will, first of all, live it for the entire duration of the time. You will literally live it. And number 2, he says, then to take that with you and constantly review and constantly contemplate. Similar to the Rebbe's advice he said earlier, but this is the specific advice here is regarding writing it down. That it should be written down. The same way we said speech is powerful, writing is also very powerful. And investing a lot of our time in writing about this subject. And this works for anything, by the way, any tikkun of a character trait or anything. We need putting it on paper, meaning putting the ways of fixing it on paper. That itself helps the fixing happen. Another advice that the Rebbe once gave to an individual was that every time they get angry, they should always afterwards make sure to ask forgiveness. That bittul of asking, the feel of asking forgiveness after getting angry, number one, it helps to deflate the ego, prevent next time anger, and it also is a little bit of a gut punch to the person. It's like a punishment to the person because he has to then, shamefully and bashfully, say, admit that they're sorry and they overstep, and that is a preventive measure from having and getting to the next time. But people who get angry and never feel they have to apologize, so they lack this ability. Number 9 is not mentioned in Svarim, but it's a very good technique that's brought in anger management courses, and that is counting to 10. Count. The person counts. That helps to calm down. Sometimes you count to 10 times, sometimes 1,000 times. But the person counting, number 10, is deep breathing. That's also, of course, something that helps. Person having deep breathing. Number 11 is very important. That's getting out of the situation. If it's, let's say, with kids or with a spouse or with a relative, first thing is get out of the situation. Let's get out of the situation. We're not going to respond. I'll say on this that this is brought down in different Sifrei Musar. I mentioned this, I believe, last week as well, that they would not give a punishment to their child while they were upset. They would wait a day or a week, however long it took for their anger to dissipate before actually giving out a punishment, a disciplinary measure. That's something, a necessity that doesn't have to be done at that very second. So what will they do? Put the child away from the situation. Usually when we're angry at what the child's doing, then we feel like dealing with it. We want to get back. The anger wants to get revenge. It wants to release, and it usually has a victim, which is the child who is misbehaving. So the first thing is get the child out of the sight, either by you moving and then moving away. That allows the victim to be out of the reach of the fire, and the fire can then slowly calm down. And only after a person really thinks about the situation, can they again come with a logical conclusion of what should be done to the children. Number 12, also quite simple and obvious, but not always done. Eat something. Often, lack of eating is what makes when we don't eat, what happens is like this. When a person doesn't eat, so we become very edgy. And the reason is explained in Chassidishe is because the soul connects, is penetrated in the body through food. The glucose that enters our bloodstream helps that bring down the soul into the body. When the soul is not healthy, stabilized in the body, so the person's always. When do you think about yourself the most? When you're under stress. When a stressful situation and you're under pain, you're focusing on yourself. Why is it that we're more prone to anger when we're under stress, when we're under physical pain? Because our body's focusing on us. So we're focusing on ourselves, so the focus of self that triggers anger is a lot more advanced. And that what causes the anger to be more, much more easily triggered. And the same idea is when a person doesn't eat, so their body's focusing, you're not calm. Your body, instead of being able to focus on other calm things, has to now focus on you. And by focusing on you, it once again gives this trigger of anger that's a person to be a lot more prone to anger, and therefore simply eating something can help relieve that situation. As they say, if an angry spouse comes home from work, just give them a bowl of soup, ignore everything they say, and you'll talk after the soup, you'll see a different person. Cheder kosher? Right. Okay, that's true, yeah. Working out, managing. Okay, we're just going to conclude with 5 segulas. So those were the 12 different things that can be done. And there's 5 segulas recorded in Chazal. These are segulas which are mystical segulas of counteracting anger. It's not something, everything we explained till now is very psychological. It has an understanding and reason behind why it battles the anger from coming to begin with, or how it helps dissipate it. These are things that makes no sense. It's segulas, broad and smart. So the segula note to dissipate anger as it already came. The first is brought by Rabbi Melech Vazhinsky in Sefer Katan, and there he writes, if you're angry, say the pasuk the 7 Canaanite nations. This is also brought in Siddur Rivash. Whenever a bad lust, the evil lust comes up, one should say this pasuk, and that'll help dissipate the lust. Now, I actually figured out the reason why, because by the time you figure out the right order, you've already moved on to another subject. It's an interesting trick. It's a school that has a reason also. Number 2 is recorded in Chassam Sofer to hold on to the corner of your clothing. And it could be what he says is based on what I'm about to say next, which is brought in many Sfarim, and including Sefer Kabbalah, Matzah Shmur, Kitzur Shlo, and others. Women may have a little bit of a difficult time doing this one, but you can always use the husbands or the mans or the sons. And that is looking at the tzitzis has the ability to extinguish the flames of anger, as we find that the word knaf is the gematria of kas.
But the corner of the clothing is talking about a man who wants to see.
The Chassam Sofer wasn't talking about tzitzis. No, I said perhaps this is where he got it from. But an independent one that's brought in regarding looking at the tzitzis, whether you're wearing tzitzis or not wearing tzitzis, looking at tzitzis, that's as knaf is the gematria of kas, and then Kabbalah teach the following: when one feels angry, lift up the tzitzis until the anger dissipates. So even if you don't own a pair of tzitzis, meaning you don't wear a pair of tzitzis, as women do not wear a pair of tzitzis, you see one of the pair of tzitzis hanging in the laundry, take the strings and hold on to them till the anger is gone. Now don't take out the anger on the strings until the strings are gone. Right? You want the tzitzis to stay kosher. Number 4, this is something Rebbe would write to people, is to check the tefillin. Rebbe said people that are having psychological imbalances, emotional imbalances, it's because there's some disconnection between the brain and the heart, and the tefillin has a lot to do with that. We've already mentioned before in our Sunday classes that even though women do not wear tefillin, their husbands do. The problem in the husband's tefillin can affect the wife. Number 5 is giving charity. Tzedakah is always good. Giving charity. Here the Rebbe says it as a school for preventing anger. But another thing that's brought down in the Muslim farm is to a person to make a neder that every time he gets angry, he's going to donate a certain amount of money to charity. And because we we don't want to give the money, so we're not going to give it. Okay, I hope everybody enjoyed. This concludes our session on this very important subject. And Amir Hashem, because we went through everything, God won't have to challenge us anymore in angry situations. And everything will be subtle and serene the rest of our lives.
And a technical, let's try it in, I don't know how these things are in the, what is it, the heater, the stove, or whatever it's called. So I always have water left over on Shabbos. Can I use it?
On Shabbos itself?
Something
Shabbos itself, the problem is that when you open up the hot water tab, you let cold water come in and you end up cooking the cold water. It's also the rice of bishop.
What if it's not just a half water?
I understand. The way plumbing works is that it works with a vacuum. That whenever water dissipates from your spout onto your sink, there is water that is now being brought into your boiler.
New water is being
correct. New water, yes. And that new water is cold.
Thing is shut. It's shut.
What things? You shut the boiler? No, the button makes no difference. You have to go and close the valve that prevents any new water from going into the boiler. Well, all the button does is it shuts off the heating system. That means the heating system is not on, but the hot water is still there. Cannot do it, correct.
What if a passive book is available?
It is available.
So can I go to it?
Absolutely, sure.
Can I get Sunday?